Welcome back to another episode of Commissioned, and this time it's a little bit different. With me, I've got three young people, and they didn't have much of a choice going into missionary work. I've got with me Michelle, Chara, and Daniel. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yes.
All right. So why I'm saying that they don't have much of a choice going into missions is because they were born into it. Their parents are full-time missionaries traveling the world, and we're going to talk to them about how it feels to be thrown into this mix of missions. So where am I going to start? Chara, let's start with you.
Yeah, go for it.
Your parents became missionaries since way before you were born.
Yes.
All right. Where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in a very small town in the Northern Cape of South Africa. And I was born in a hospital after many hours.
Wow, that's a lot of detail.
Right?
But my thought was that you were born somewhere under a tree or something in Africa while your parents were on missions.
Yeah.
So you actually got the privilege of being born in South Africa.
I did. My mom had a lot of complications with me.
Okay.
She nearly lost me while living in Importokoso, a small village in the north of Zambia.
Mm-hmm.
But after about 6 weeks, they went straight back into missions. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely not. They were all in.
So you would say almost you grew up in Zambia.
I consider myself actually Zambian, you know.
Okay.
Most of my siblings are Zambian, and I really associate with the culture. I've been there for most of my life, you know, so it's a really special place in my heart.
Yeah. So now, Michelle, you've got a very similar situation where your mom and dad they do missionary work in Madagascar.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you born?
Also in South Africa.
Okay.
I was born in Klerksdorp.
Klerksdorp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's also very far off. But did you grow up in Madagascar?
Yeah, I lived most of my life there.
So would you also consider yourself as, what do you call that? Madagascar. Okay.
Madagascar.
Not like the movie. Anyway, so what were some of the experiences with you growing up? What can you remember?
Well, I was part of many of the things that my family did, my parents. So they have clubs, what's called clubs. So they reach out to children.
Mm-hmm.
So many of my friends were those that my parents would try to reach out to. I went to a French school for quite a while.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you there because we have to talk about this subject. Can you speak? What language do they speak in Madagascar?
Malagasy.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you speak it?
I can. I'm not too fluent in it, but I can speak it.
Okay, so how does it sound when you say hello, how are you?
Salama Inan Faufau.
So if I heard that, I thought you wanted me to buy salami, but that's cool. That's cool. So you could actually speak to your friends like normal. That's how you grew up, and that was fine. Mm-hmm. What language do they speak in Zambia?
There are many languages in Zambia, but the language that I grew up speaking was Bemba.
Bemba.
I'm not fluent in it anymore, but to say hello is Mulishani.
Oh, that's nice. So Daniel, your turn. Your whole situation is really cool. So your dad is from South Africa and your mom is from? Russia, but specifically from the Yakut tribe.
People, yes.
Yakut people. Okay. But you guys all speak Russian.
Yes, we do speak Russian, but we also speak Afrikaans and English.
So that's the crazy part, because I've seen you've got four sisters. Four sisters. And you guys would be talking full on Russian like you would not believe it. And then just when somebody in Afrikaans starts talking to you, you guys just switch over to Afrikaans.
I grew up actually speaking Afrikaans. My dad spoke to me in Afrikaans from my birth.
Okay.
But then as my sisters came, it's kind of, my dad got overpowered because they started speaking Russian and there was 4 against 1. So we kind of switched to Russian afterwards. Yes.
Okay, and then naturally English as well.
English we learned when we were living in America.
Okay.
Yes.
So now this would be the next question. It means that you guys actually lived a couple of different parts of the world. Now, Michelle, where Chara, you guys did homeschooling, But Michelle, your parents sent you away to boarding school.
Yes, they did.
Were you guys that bad?
No, hopefully not.
So where did you go to school to?
I went to a missionary kids school in Kenya.
Okay, so there's actually a school for missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
So do they teach you how to be a missionary, or is it just because your folks are missionaries?
Yeah, it's just to help support missionaries and enable them to do their work. So then they take the kids and they teach them anything, math, English, all of the things that you need to do basically to get into universities and things like that.
Do you guys think that just because your folks are missionaries that you are forced to be missionaries as well?
That's a challenging question because I think it's kind of like it's like a coin, you know, there are two sides to the story. I think in many ways you are born into the world of the missionary. And I think in many ways you associate with it. It's kind of become our comfort zone, which most people wouldn't consider comfortable. But at the same time, or at least for my parents, they really encouraged us to pursue our callings and our passions. So if that did not mean missions, it does not, you know, mission. But we still have a heart for missions. And I think that's the difference. We love missions, but we're not necessarily all called to become missionaries. Okay. You know?
Actually, that's a common attribute of missionary kids. They don't become missionaries.
So now, this brings me to my next question. There was a term that you used for what you guys call yourselves.
We call ourselves third culture kids.
Third culture kids. Okay, explain please.
Well, I'm new to this term.
Oh, okay.
I haven't.
So don't look at him.
No, never mind.
I probably lived it out, but
I don't know if I have the best explanation, but it's basically where you grow up in a different culture than your own. So then you take in parts of the culture that's like your home culture or your nationality culture, kind of. And then you take in parts of the culture of where you live.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of a combination of both, and you create your own kind of culture from that.
So that is actually pretty cool, because even though you're South African, you say that you consider yourself to be Zambian.
Yes, and I think that is a pretty common attribute of a third culture kid. You know, we associate with more than one culture.
Okay.
So I'm at home in South Africa as a South African, but I'm also at home in Zambia, and I consider myself a Zambian. So like Michelle said, you know, we take on attributes of different cultures and create our own things. So where most people can't consider or they associate themselves or their identity with a culture, we associate ourselves more with people. Okay.
So, all right. Yeah, because Michelle, now not only were you in Madagascar from South Africa, but you went to school in Kenya. So that's a third culture with you. And Daniel, I mean, not only are you Russian, but you also Yakuts.
No.
Explain to us what.
So my mom, I wouldn't say she inherited the culture of Yakut people, because her family was kind of Russified, I would say, or they went through the process of assimilation to the Russian culture. Okay. So I would say I grew up in a Russian culture, though not in a Russian household.
Well, clearly. Because it was like South African and...
Yeah.
Okay.
But I grew up with the Russian stories that would be told by my mom, or the kinder activities and all that stuff. So I'm not really... I don't consider myself knowledgeable in the culture of Yakut people. I know bits, but not much. Okay. They have their own language, their own... Yeah, it's a whole different culture group. And
okay. Are you guys... Do you feel sad that you were born in this kind of situation? Would you rather be in a normal household?
Never.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Yeah. The benefits that gives you that are given to you by this situation are far greater than...
Yeah. Okay. So my next question is, so with your parents, just because I know your parents, I know that they're very passionate about missionary work and for the kingdom of God and so on. Have you seen amazing things while your parents were reaching out and working with people in the area that they're working?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people think that when they say you've seen amazing things, they're thinking like these insane miracles, you know, where people come back to life or something like that. But I think in some way the love that they showed to each and every individual for me was something magical, or the way that they incorporated us into ministry with them to make us a part of the team. I think that was beautiful. So for example, every Christmas we would go to the AIDS hospice, you know, where we play with the children, where we were taught to love despite, you know. So I think for me that was incredible. Or there were times where we wouldn't have food and somehow someone will knock on the door and say, I don't know you, but God told me to bring you food. Things like that. I think just those simple, small miracles, I guess, that I personally consider to be amazing.
Do you think that it might be an advantage that you've seen more of a reality of the kingdom of God than somebody living in a normal household might have seen?
I think we really get to know God on a personal level. Whereas I've come back and I've realized that a lot of people here or in Western culture, they so often forget about God. So in a sense, I think it's amazing that we get to have that personal relationship with Him throughout our entire life.
If there is a message that you would say to future missionaries that's going to become parents, what kind of advice would you guys give them?
Well, just as Chara stated earlier before the interview, consider kids are your mission as well. It's not just, I understand that having a passion for people, for nations is good, but don't forget about your kids.
Yeah, I totally agree. We were actually talking about this earlier, and I just, you know, your children are your ministry. And one day you're also going to have to stand before the throne, and you're going to have to talk about how you raise your children to love Jesus, you know? And I think sometimes people associate like missions or being in ministry or being a pastor as like, you have to abandon your children or you don't have time for your children. But I think you need to make time for them and make them a part of what you're doing, because if you push them away, then obviously they're going to turn away, you know? So yeah, I think that's really important. Your children are just as much your ministry as your actual ministries.
Maybe that's the reason why many kids don't become missionaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very blunt, but yes. For
Well,
some people, there are pros and cons to being part of this world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some funny things that you guys have seen over the years being part of a missionary family? Because it's not all straight face, very serious. I presume that you guys have a lot of fun as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, even my family in general was crazy and fun. I'm one of 16 children. You know, we're a big family. We live in a world of organized chaos. So that in itself was fun and crazy. But we always had people in our house, obviously, on top of the children that we were. So one day my parents called a family meeting, and they said, who are the people in our guest room? And why are there suitcases there? And we all turned to them and said, but Mom and Dad, they've been living with us for a week. So my parents were living in a house where we had guests for an entire week, and I didn't even notice because of the sheer just abundance of people that we were living with every day.
Okay, so just before we end off then, so we did speak about amazing things that you saw while growing up and stuff. What would be one of the most amazing things that you would remember?
I think in our case, it is coming to South Africa. I mean, it was really a leap of faith. We had our passports. They expired, so we didn't know about that until August, and we had to fly in February because my grandma turned 100. And they told us that it's going to take 9+ months. We actually eventually my parents went to the Moscow embassy of South Africa. They applied for the new passports, and we kind of left it there. In February, the passport's still not heard of, and we flew to Moscow to actually go and check. We decided that if it's not going to work out, we're going to just have a nice time by our friends in Moscow, whom we didn't see for a long time. And then on the day we actually wanted to fly, my dad went to the embassy to get the passports, if they are there, but we didn't know that. It was the day before holidays, so after that it would have been too late, and it was also a short day, so they worked until 12. And there's another whole story about how my dad got to Moscow. It was interrupted and there were a lot of problems, and eventually my dad got there 5 minutes before it's getting closed. And he got the passport. I don't know how. Eventually it was just the moment my dad stepped into the embassy, they said, it was the workers who said that. The moment my dad stepped into the embassy, the car came with the diplomatic mail and they got our passports.
Wow.
And so that evening we flew to South Africa.
Wow.
That is so cool.
Wow. And that just goes to show you that God's time is always perfect, because you didn't need the passports until that moment. So I'm going to stop here because next time we're going to go on. This is just too long. We need to talk more to them. So we'll see you guys next time again in another episode of Commissioned with these three young people.